It's wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So, before we dive into your work with dealing with trauma and burnout, one of the
hmm
biggest things that we've lived through in our lifetimes was 5 years ago, this whole pandemic was raging. How
Yeah.
much of living through that has reverberated into what you do, work or personal wise, in your life today?
Yeah. Well, like many professions, the biggest thing was that I went from having this beautiful office in, the Fillmore district of San Francisco to being totally virtual, right? And I had just broken out on my own as a solo. I'm a therapist, so I had just, hung my own shingle, and I was really proud of that office,
Yeah.
and loved having that nice waiting room for everyone to come and kind of transition into therapy. And then, after a couple of months of that, it was like, oh, no, we're on Zoom. And I made the decision to shelter in place with my parents. So I'm like in my childhood bedroom, like running my business from there, right? But what really stuck out to me then is that my clients weren't there for the fancy waiting room. They
Yeah.
were really there for the content. They were there because of the skills that I had developed over the years, and because we were all really struggling. And a mentor of mine said, we're in the soup that we're stirring here as therapists because we were all going through it. And I think it's unfortunate, but therapy was pretty popular during the pandemic
Yeah.
and particularly pre-vaccine pandemic. And a lot of my colleagues and I just our businesses just boomed, and there was overwhelming demand. And I think that many of us have stayed all virtual. And yeah, there's some demand for in person, definitely. I have opted to stay all virtual. The people I work with prefer it that way. They
Yeah.
don't want to drive somewhere else and find parking and wait in a waiting room, right? They want to get their therapy and go on with their day.
Yeah.
So it just like most professions, it was that transition to being virtual. But then also for me, as a, growing professional, like, oh no, they're here for me and for the
Yeah.
services, not for however it's packaged.
Yeah, for sure. So
hmm
let's get into the heart and soul of what you do right now for a living. And to
hmm
do that, kids always pull the truth out. So I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of 12-year-olds at career day. Kid in the back of the room is like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How
Yeah,
do you
yeah,
answer them?
yeah. I help people who have been through something really scary or hard feel like themselves again.
So what did you want to be when you were 12 years old? What was your dream life?
Honestly, I'm on plan A still.
Okay. All right,
I
cool.
know I'm a weirdo, but I think that I'm probably equally interested in being a therapist or being a Broadway actress.
Okay.
So either one of those felt viable at the time, and I chose the path of less resistance.
Sure. Well, and you're out in LA, so you're around in that kind of community and
Yeah,
obviously with
yeah.
clientele and all that. So let me ask you this. Take me back to where you were born and raised. What
hmm
were the seeds that were planted that got you into therapy? Why did you want to
Yeah,
help people? How did this evolve into your life today?
yeah. So I was in middle school, and I was in the Bay Area, and I went to see my first therapist. There was some like social stuff happening at school, and it was hard. And so I went to see this therapist, and I remember leaving that office and going, I think that's the thing that I want to do, because I knew it was about what was my story, how was I seeing my story at the time, and then how could I reframe my story and make conscious choices to have a different outcome or a different experience. It wasn't about changing me. It was about building my own resilience through narrative that, gave me the strength to deal with some difficult social dynamics. And, middle school is a rough time for everyone,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that was really when the seed was planted, that first session. I'm actually still in touch with that therapist,
Cool.
and it's been really cool. I mean, it's been 25 years since then. And to just see kind of how at each juncture I made the decision that led me to this path. And I absolutely love what I do. It was absolutely the right choice.
What was the first seminal client for you? What was the first moment where, I mean, there's one thing where you have this
Yeah.
dream, this is what you want to do, but when you
hmm
see it actually materialize and you see a positive net result, was
Yeah.
there a moment like that where you were confirmed that you made the right choice?
I mean, yeah, it happens all the time. Because of people's confidentiality, I don't want to give any
Yeah, right,
specifics,
right,
but
right.
But actually there was a little more doubt at first because when you are first seeing clients and you're in that like floppy-footed puppy phase of like,
Yep.
I don't know what I'm doing,
Uh-huh.
particularly the first 1,000 hours that you're seeing clients, it's really shaky. And I was working in a family Medi-Cal clinic. Medi-Cal is the public health insurance here in California, and also in a middle school. And so like really tough cases and then, in a middle school, like no one wants to go back to middle school because it's that hard, you know?
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, oh God, did I make the right choice here? But then when I started working with adults, I was like, oh yeah, this is it. I'm good with this. So it
Yeah.
was just finding the right population.
Who has been that inspiration for you that's allowed you to evolve and embrace this career and to become who you are?
Yeah, I had a couple of really incredible clinical supervisors, and I really credit them with building my confidence and my skill set and, just having a lot of faith in me. And I'm still in touch with them. They fill in. Now I'm a supervisor, I'm a clinical supervisor, and they fill in when I'm on vacation or I'm sick. And um, this is a really personality-based field, and having the right mentors in the role of clinical supervisor can really make or break your experience. And I got really lucky.
So let me ask you this. Do you ever, and I know this there's confidentialities, but this is
Yeah.
just kind of a vague look
hmm
into it. Do you ever have people that are curious about their lives, they feel like something's off, and they come in, and it's not until you've talked with them that they recognize they had trauma?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I would say like half the people that I consider trauma clients, they don't conceptualize of themselves in that way. All of us have trauma. It may not be combat trauma or, a major assault or witnessing, a natural disaster or a terrorist attack, but we all have trauma in some way. And I have a very broad definition of trauma. It's really anything, any experience you had that negatively impacted the way you see yourself or the world in a way that is that it elicits a reaction today that is outsized,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some people I know that there's been some therapeutic services that there's a timeline and
hmm
then see where you go from there. But my question to you is this: how do you put a timeline on trauma? Do you get to a point where you get to this place where it's in the rearview mirror enough and you can function and other things that are
hmm
positive come in there and kind of obscure that? Or is
hmm
it a lifelong thing? I
hmm
mean, when do you get to a point where you're like, it's time for me to move on? Because even dealing with the trauma can continue to bring trauma. How
Yeah.
does that philosophically work?
Yeah. Uh, it's so different for each person, but let's say we have an acute trauma, like a car accident or something like that. Um, I really view it as resolved when someone can be sitting in their living room and think through the details of it and not have a physiological reaction.
Yeah.
And one of the practices that I use, EMDR, is very, very effective at helping people process it that way. And we know that trauma is a memory that got stored differently in the brain in a way that you recall it too often in inappropriate circumstances, right? It's your brain doing too good a job of protecting you. So with EMDR, it's helping your brain store that memory differently. You're always going to remember it, but maybe not in the excruciating detail and not with the physiological, emotional reaction with it. So if something's really stuck, I that's definitely my go-to, and I'd say 85% of people respond really well to it. And like you're saying, there are some people that it just naturally happens, that the brain naturally restores that memory in a way where it's not as activating. But, 25% of the time with a major trauma, you are going to need some outside help. Just like sometimes we need medical intervention to reset a bone or a round of antibiotics to heal an infection, right? We're not weak because we need those interventions. It's just sometimes you need a little help getting the brain back on the right track.
Do you remember that movie with Jim Carrey, Eternal Sunshine on the Spotless Brain?
hmm hmm
Do you think there's a little bit of the tenets of EMDR that were a part of that whole like
mm
rerouting of the brain
hmm
synapses?
No, because you'll always remember it. It doesn't delete the memory. You're
Gotcha.
very much going to have it,
Yeah.
but it really cuts the tie between the memory and that like kind of jump scare or that like tension that comes up.
Yeah.
You're never going to think what happened was okay. You're never going to
Right.
be like, "Oh yeah, that was great." But it's
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, that was really rough and I'm okay now."
Yeah.
That's what EMDR does. Because yeah, we don't want to go in there and start deleting things. That always messes things up.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking loosely because that whole
Mm,
idea was just so radical. It was just totally
yes.
black and white.
Yeah,
Um,
well, and when something really horrible happens to you, it makes sense to want to delete it.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me
Yeah.
ask you this. You had mentioned kind of going through burnout, and it seems like
Mm,
since we came out of COVID and everybody's
hmm.
hard charging, like the
Yeah.
Wild West, everybody's running to get their plot of land and
Yeah.
far and away. You know, what are you getting a lot of people that are trying to kind of curb that lead up into burnout
Yeah.
that's happening?
I usually see them when it's pretty far into burnout,
Gotcha.
and they recognize that they're burnt out, or like 50-50 with my trauma clients. They sometimes recognize it and they sometimes don't, because it can be hard to tell, like, am I burnt out? Am I depressed? Am I traumatized? And kind of getting in there and unpacking it and seeing what flavor we have. It can take a little bit of time, but usually I can spot the burnout, and it shows up in certain fields pretty heavily. A lot of lawyers, a lot of execs. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
So what do you do at that point when you've hit that point?
Hmm.
Do you have to like, does the client in a lot of scenarios have to exit that life, or do they just
Mm.
get coping mechanism?
No, no, no. And I think that's why a lot of people don't want to start therapy or don't want to seek treatment for burnout because they think that that means that they're going to have to give up, a career that for most of the time they've loved it or a lifestyle that it enables, right? No, absolutely not. You can get burnout therapy and, really treat it and then go back to working, but with a different mindset. It's really learning to rest without feeling guilty, right? That's a huge one. Getting your nervous system re-regulated, so getting you out of that fight or flight that you probably have been in for many years because that feels normal to you. And then I have a whole kind of schema of a holistic picture of what areas of each person's life do we need to do some work in so that we can do that mindset shift and jump back into work, but not in a way that costs you so much time and energy, right? You can still be highly productive and successful, but not at your own expense.
So, the thing about high profile people,
Hmm.
whether it's actors or people in high professions, is that we always have this kind of God complex. Like
Mm,
they don't deal with things the way that we deal with
mm,
things, except in very, very small percentages where we see a psychic break like Kanye West or Charlie Sheen or something like that.
mm,
So what is that living through these scenarios and helping people that are
yeah.
high profile, that are seen as people that are immune to that?
Mm,
How has that helped you not only as a human being, but as a therapist?
yeah. How does witnessing others help
Yeah,
me?
just
Oh,
helping them
yeah.
get through that. How has that helped your empathy and your
Yeah.
path?
I mean, I think I was drawn to working with burnout because I'm predisposed to it myself because, I'm always coming up with ideas for new projects or new marketing ideas, new offerings that my practice can offer. And I employ other therapists. I love doing that. But seeing other people and how they just run themselves into the ground, I'm just constantly surrounded by cautionary tales, right? So it's made me really intentional about my schedule. When am I going to see clients and when am I not? What boundaries do I have with how available am I to clients and when am I not? And I think it's really important for me to be modeling to my clients these lifestyle choices around like, no, I don't answer messages after 7 p.m.
Yeah.
I'm not available on weekends and during business hours and during their session. Absolutely. I'm very available to them and I'm great at what I do because I have those boundaries,
Yeah.
right? So they're whether they consciously notice it or not, seeing what does it actually look like to practice these boundaries and to do the preventative work so that I can do this until I'm super old and don't want to anymore, rather than having to retire or having to take medical leave for burnout or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because I've definitely worked with a handful of people that have had to take medical leave for burnout because it was that severe.
Yeah.
So I get to walk my talk is what I think I'm saying here.
Yeah. So how do you separate, you got to deal with heavy stuff with your
Yeah.
clients, but
Hmm.
you also have a soul you have to nurture. What is the
Hmm.
motivation every day for you to wake up to do this work and to take
Yeah.
care of yourself?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I just love it. I love being in a session where someone has that aha moment, or we process a trauma and they're able to get on an airplane or get behind the wheel without that anxiety, or they feel more peace and fulfillment in their relationships. Or, I'm nurturing young therapist talent in my employees that are doing their associateship hours with me. I think I've just always, it's so easy to find meaning in the work because I get to see the results. I feel bad for doctors and other professions that kind of only see people when they're sick,
Yeah.
because I actually get to see kind of the arc of things a lot of the time. And even if I have one person that's really in a tough spot, I have another person that's just come out of it, and I'm seeing that resilience and I'm seeing that growth and the full potential that humans have. So I'm kind of always getting a sampling across that arc.
Yeah.
And of course there are times when everyone's going through it, like the pandemic, but
Yeah.
it's a really people think that this is a hard profession, and sure, but there are hard parts of every profession,
Sure.
right? And I think the fulfillment and the meaning that is just baked into the work make it a lot easier than people might assume. Once you have the skills and you know what you're doing and you have good boundaries, I think it's a little easier than some people might think.
So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight and ran into that version of you after your first visit and you
Mm-hmm.
realized that's what you wanted to do with your life, and you could give
Mm-hmm.
that young version of you a piece of advice based on this career you've had, the wisdom you've accumulated, what
Yeah.
advice would you impart on her?
I think I would say to 12-year-old Laurel, like, hey, it's going to be a lot easier to be you at 25, and even easier at 35, and even easier at almost 40 now. And just keep going. It just gets a little easier every year.
I mean, isn't that kind of the touchstone of therapy, anyways? I mean, time
Mm,
is the biggest healer of anything
mm,
that we
yeah.
go through.
Time and meaningful, loving relationships
Yeah.
with ourselves and with others. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you walk into a room of everybody that's known you professionally throughout all these years.
Mm-hmm.
You can swim through that group of people, go to a podium, and tell them one fun thing about you. Whether you jumped out of an airplane, the first concert you saw, you outran a bear, something fun. What
Uh-huh.
story would you tell that room?
Oh gosh. Um, I think that they might, some of them, a lot of them don't know. I'm also a singer, not
Okay.
professionally,
Right?
but that I had, I think they might be a little surprised that I got on stage at karaoke recently.
Nice. Very nice. I like
Yeah.
it. I like it. So, of everything that you've done, accomplished, and most importantly evolved to, what are you ultimately the proudest of?
Mm. I think that I have built a life where I have a tremendous amount of control over my schedule and who I work with and what my impact looks like, and the freedom that comes with the entrepreneurship of being your own boss. I think that's what I'm most proud of. It gives me a lot of freedom so that I can fill my own cup and have enough resources to take care of everyone that I care about and my clients.
So, at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients,
Uh-huh.
everyone that you work with, but you run the show. What's your
Yeah.
perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I am an entrepreneur that is genuinely interested in helping everyone have really great relationships.
So, if there's anybody out there that's curious about EMDR, about
Hmm.
burnout, about taking care of trauma, whether they're cognizant of it or not, they may be on that precipice of having questions. What would you tell them to reach out, to pursue it further and find healing and find a better place?
Yeah, there are a lot of resources, and of course, we're only licensed in a handful of states, so we can't work with everyone. But we have a lot of content on our blog about EMDR because it's a weird modality. Like you move your eyes, what's happening here?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It seems a little bit woo, but I've been doing it for too long, and it just gets results. So we have a lot of content on our blog. We even have a free webinar that people can watch where we actually walk through what EMDR looks like. And because it is weird and people have a lot of questions. And we've got tons of resources on our website, laureltherapy.net. And then there are lots of resources out there. Just don't rely on AI summaries.
Okay.
Yeah.
So aside from the weather, what's the best thing about living in LA?
Uh, Everyone seems to have a lot of flexibility in their schedule. And so, I can go grab lunch with someone on a weekday,
Okay.
right? Yeah,
Interesting.
it's
I've
pretty
never
great.
heard that before. That's cool.
Hmm.
Very cool. Laurel, this has been great. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. And so again, if anybody wants to reach out, what's the best way to do that?
Our website is laureltherapy.net.
Okay. All right. I will put that in the show notes. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for your story and time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, friends. Joe Domino here. I just wanted to let you know that after 30 years or so, I have finally released my first book of poetry through the mighty Spartan Press here in Kansas City, Missouri. As the creator and host of both Neon Jazz Radio and the Famous Interviews with Joe Domino podcast, along with being a visual artist, I'm ready to embark on a new adventure and want you to be a part of it. You can get a copy online via Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and actually on the streets in Kansas City at the great Prospero's bookstore off 39th Street. You can also visit joedomino.com for links to the book, to more poetry, and everything in my world, including paintings. Thanks for all of the love and support over the years, and please dig the words.